All right, Matthew and Maddie's. We had one of the last two problem children here this week, last couple of weeks actually. We had a 2002 Duramax 2500 Silverado. Customer complaint was new speedometer. So basically, when you had this thing keyed up running down the road, we didn't have any wheel speed. And initially, this one's a good one about diagnosing modules to everybody out there, because that's ultimately what it turned out to be. It turned out to be this nice, fancy Allison TCM. In this configuration of vehicle, there's a couple different engines. Could be gas, could be diesel. The diesel is going to have a TCM ECM setup, where the gassers, I believe, have a powertrain control module, one module that's controlling everything. But basically, when this gentleman had come in, this was another word-of-mouth customer referred from the Dodge Ram that we were messing with, I think last month already, with regards to the oil pan. There's a speed sensor in the transfer case for the rear wheels, and then you have your two wheel speeds up front. The speed sensor in the transfer case, when we go and start looking at the diagram that I have, the speed sensor in the transfer case basically goes back to the TCM. So it's a real simple circuit, but again, it's ruling out everything. Whenever you're diagnosing or condemning any type of module, you always have to rule out, because you can't see inside the circuit board, you got to rule out every other circuit involved. And I had checked this thing and rechecked it. The first thing that we did was check the cluster. I did a gauge sweep with the scan tool. The stepper motor was bad. It would only go up halfway on the cluster, but it was still moving. I wasn't on board with a cluster fixing this thing, but we did end up ultimately having to send the cluster in, which kind of delayed the process a little bit. After I had initially tested wires, I had load tested circuits, 822 and 821 here, which basically run from the TCM all the way back to the transfer case tail housing where the speed sensor is located. I had good AC voltage when I was spinning the wheels, and I had the connector off up here, and we were checking with the multimeter, a unicorn tool. Load tested wires, they were checking out good. Still no speedometer. We ended up putting the cluster in because we knew it was bad and it had other issues. And again, it was a PO500 was the initial, which is vehicle speed, VSS speed sensor circuit. And obviously cluster got put in, still had the same issues. So then the other night I had spent some time not charging the customer, and this is how I operate. But I rechecked all my steps after we got it back with the new cluster in. We once putting the cluster in, the ironic thing was we had an ABS code at that point where we didn't have before. So getting the cluster flashed and programmed and reinstalled into this vehicle after it was refurbished to the dealer, the ABS module was goofing up. So then I was back to my diagrams, and there were a couple of bulletins on Identifix about there's a yellow wire that goes from the TCM and the ECM, and another yellow wire, which I believe are two comm lines. And you really have to dig in the diagrams. You really got to know what you're looking for, because it's not all on this one page with the vehicle speed sensor. Those are on a couple of different pages, and you really got to kind of dig. But it's important because one or two of those bulletins that I was coming up with the Duramax, with this setup with the ECM and TCM, one of those wires was bad. Now I had load tested, pulled everything apart, rechecked it. It's still good. I rechecked the AC voltage, even ran an overlay because the wires were kind of brittle going back, and there is an inline connector that does tend to have problems on these. Didn't fix it. So then I called the customer, and I was pretty sure 99.9% were into the TCM. Thank God this gentleman had a couple of used TCM sitting around on similar vintage Silverados. Put that baby in, did a reset and everything, and bam, speedometer's working. So another good diag. another point where, like I said, I don't just throw parts at stuff. I go through my steps here at Maddie's Auto Repair. I'm training Brandon up on that. Been in constant contact with the customer. It was a few weeks because GM was out of the cluster for this, so we actually had to send his cluster back to get refurbished and then sent back to us, but stuck with it. I don't give up on this shit, and this guy is going to be happy. He was already happy. I just got off the phone with him a little while ago. So another good diag and another freaking good repair leaving here, and another not so common issue. These TCMs, there are some fairly common issues with them. The speedometer, though, I'm pretty sure the driver had gone out in there because it was getting the signal. The pins were all intact, everything right up to the TCM. We just had no transfer of that speed sensor signal from that module to the cluster. So and it was enough to set the check engine light, and then obviously the light in the ABS module once we did whatever. And again, I don't care if you bring your own parts. This gentleman ultimately had the fix with one of the 2 used TCMs that he provided. As far as the cluster goes, he initially had brought 2 clusters, which would have been fine. However, these were out of a different vintage, different connector location. They would not communicate when they were plugged into the vehicle. It had the similar plug, just different part number, different cluster, different application. But it was worth trying. And that's what I'm about. I'm about getting something fixed, especially a not so common issue at the end of the day, and I do my due diligence. In 17 years, I keep seeing new stuff, so it's awesome. This one's going to be shipping tomorrow morning, and we'll be starting off with the last problem child here, which I'm sure she's watching. So make it a great Thursday.